Hello everyone, and welcome back to Gwimb Discusses 40k Things. This isn't the fifth take, I'm not getting increasingly pissed off. But anyway, eons ago I made a video about which of the Primarchs liked who. And I said next week I'll make a video of which of the Primarchs really didn't like each other. So, weeks turned into months, it would seem. Life gets in the way, but here we are. Better late than never. Hey, at least I'm faster than imperial bureaucracy. Right, moving on. So, we're going to be discussing which of the Primarchs hated or really didn't like each other. Now, the Horus heresy screws everyone's likes and dislikes pretty chronically, so we're going to just focus on the Great Crusade up to the end of the Great Crusade period. And we're going to just focus on Primarchs that really didn't like each other. Not an argument or a disagreement, the ones that they really just wanted to punch. So, we shall start at the first Primarch, Lionel Johnson. Now, not much is too known about the Lion. He was a very secretive guy. And there are only really two notable examples amongst his brothers of those he didn't like so much. Now, the first one is obvious, and we all know about Russ's spat with the Lion, which I recommend reading Russ's Primarch novel, which actually covers the incident. It's pretty good. Better than the Lion's Primarch novel, but there we go. So it's Russ, but the second one you might not think about is actually Horus. They had a bit of an argument at Zaramund, and the Lion really thought Horus was kind of an arrogant dick. So they really was not much love between the two brothers. And it does actually show up quite a bit of the disdain the Lion had towards Horus towards the end. It's interesting. The first found and the first made having, this disagreement with each other. But interesting nonetheless. Now, moving on to the third Primarch, the second doesn't count, Fulgrim. Now, it's interesting again. Fulgrim was a social butterfly, and there were many that didn't like him, but there weren't that many that hated him, and there weren't too many that he hated. He did think down, or look down on many of his brothers, but he didn't openly hate many of them. The notable exception of that is definitely the Khan. Now, Fulgrim kind of thought Gilman and Dawn were a bit boring, but he really didn't like the Khan that much, and that was because the Khan didn't take Fulgrim's bullshit, and they had a few spats. If you read Scars, it actually goes into a nice little conversation between Fulgrim and the Khan, which clearly shows how much disdain Fulgrim has for Jagatai. It's actually a pretty good scene, and Khan gives a really awesome burn. So we're going to pencil in the Khan for disliking for Fulgrim, because he got on reasonably well with most of his other brothers, even like he was the mentor to Curse, so there's not that obvious contender for hatred there. So, yeah, failing too much other information, it's basically the Jagatai. Perturbo. Brave, bold Perturbo. This was a guy who really couldn't catch a break. He was still a douchebag and he brought much of it on himself, controversial opinion, but there we go. So, Perturbo, it's interesting, even during the heresy, Perturbo says he doesn't openly hate any of his traitor loyalist brothers, he just views them as the enemy or opposition. And in the Great Crusade period, there weren't many instances of him openly hating his brothers. However, there is the obvious notable exception to that, which is Dawn. Perturbo and Dawn really hated each other towards the end. It was a palpable hatred. And, I don't even need to explain it, because I think everybody knows the hatred between Perturbo and Dawn, which was even in the Great Crusade before the heresy. Another notable incident, I will say, between Perturbo and one of his brothers was Russ, of all people, having to break up a fight between Corax and Perturbo, when Perturbo accused Corax of being a coward during the Battle of Gate 42. So, Corax certainly hated Perturbo, but it's not much known if that is reciprocated on Perturbo's end. So the only obvious answer we have is Dawn. But that's alright. Now, moving along, Jagatai Khan. We've covered a little bit of this earlier, but the notable hatred or dislike or disdain is for Fulgrim. Now, he didn't like Dawn's tactics or anything like that, but they had a great respect for each other. So that's not really hatred, but one of his brothers he really didn't like during the Crusade was Fulgrim. Now, he had a great respect and an actual, more deeper bond with, say, Mortarion than you would think. But, of course, that dies during the Heresy and they become blood enemies after that. But during the Great Crusade, the Khan really stuck to himself and tried to just completely stay out of the affairs of his brothers. So the only notable incident he had was with Fulgrim. So there you go. Now, Russ. Leman Russ, the Wolf King of Fenris. Now, again, he had scraps with his brothers, but there weren't many notable hatreds aside from the Lion and Magnus, which are, of course, well known throughout the canon. I mean, even when he fought Angron, he was doing it to try and beat some sense into his brother. He wasn't doing it out of hatred. He didn't hate Angron, he just wanted him to fucking stop being an idiot for 5 minutes and understand what he was trying to tell him. So, Russ, really the notable people he didn't like amongst his brothers were Magnus for his use of sorcery and arrogance and hypocrisy, and the Lion for being an arrogant bastard, but again, they sorted that out at the end, so not too bad. If only he'd, maybe not burnt Prospero. Idiot. Anyway, Rogel Dawn. Now, Dawn. Well, we're going to start a trend here, and Dawn did not like Perturbo, as we have established, and he did not like Curse. Now, fucking nobody likes Curse, because Curse is disgusting, but there we go. I mean, Curse nearly killed Dawn, slashing the shit out of him when he confronted him about his visions, and Dawn did not have a great deal of like or respect for Curse or Perturbo, but there weren't too many other notable cases. I mean, he thought Fulgrim was a bit arrogant, but again, Dawn was one of those, he didn't really hate his brothers unless they gave him a reason to hate them, and in this case it is Perturbo and Curse, so there you go. Again, it's interesting because the brothers didn't really all hate each other until the heresy broke out, and then it turned into real hatred. Now, moving on from the 7th to the 8th, Conrad Curse. Now, this bastard is hated by pretty much most of his loyal brothers for his bullshit, and most of his traitor brothers as well, let's be honest. However, interestingly, I've been going through Curse's Primarch novel. He was saying he doesn't hate any of his brothers except for Corax, which I found interesting. Like, he doesn't hold them any grudges, he doesn't despise their guts. However, I'm more of the opinion of that's an asshole answer. For example, you go up to a guy you fucking hate and you go, I fucking hate your guts, and he goes, well, I don't even hate you, like, I don't even like or hate you, so that's like your problem? Like one of those guys, like, fuck, you just want to punch them in the face. And I think every one of his brothers wanted to punch Curse in the face at one point. So really, going by Curse's own words, the only one of his brothers he truly hated was Corax. But I'll be honest, I think he fucking hated everyone and everything, that bastard. Good riddance on the galaxy. Now, Sanguinius, the Angel. Again, Sanguinius was a bro. He didn't, hate anybody in the Crusade, really. I mean, he may have found Alfarius's evasive tactics annoying, and he may have found Curse to be a bit of a dick, but there was no real open, outright hatred. I mean, yeah, he had a few, spats with people, but he was pretty much a negotiator that kind of was at least respected by everyone. I don't actually think until the heresy broke out and his hatred for his traitor brothers actually, began, that he really hated any of his brothers at all. I think Sanguinius was just a good guy like that. Good on him. Now, moving on to a less great guy. Ferris Magnus. What a cunt he was. Forgive me, my bias is showing through here, but again, Ferris was interesting. He didn't get on too many well with his brothers. Now, notably, he really hated Dawn. Like, he hated Dawn because Dawn insulted him and called him out for his bullshit on the deck of his flagship in front of his Iron Hand brothers, or sons, I should say. So, he really didn't like Dawn. He didn't like Gilman, even though Gilman liked him. I mean, he didn't like Jagatai. It's interesting in the fact that he didn't like Logar either. Ferris really hated and didn't like many of his brothers. In fact, I think he probably either treated them with contempt or outright disdain. All of his brothers except for Vulcan, really. So yeah, Ferris was kind of an asshole. I mean, every family has one, and on the loyalist side of the tree, it seems to be firmly on Ferris Magnus' shoulders. Unlike his head. Moving on. The 11th Primarch, that doesn't exist. Moving on. Angron. Who did Angron outright hate? The silence was supposed to be because it's fucking obvious. Everyone and everything, because he had the butcher's nails in his head and he was insane. However, there are some notable examples of this, like he really didn't like Fulgrim's bullshit and his vanity, even, before the heresy during the Great Crusade, and he didn't like Gilman that much either. He basically hated all of his brothers that had a better upbringing than him. I mean, he had no friends. I mean, he even said he didn't like Horus, at the start of Isfahan 3. He said to one of his dying loyalist sons, "Oh, I don't even like Horus. He's a competent commander, but he's still an arrogant bastard." So really, we're just going to pencil down everyone and everything for Angron. The dude really should have probably, been treated better, or just snapped neck. Oh well, Big E does what he does. Right, 13th Primarch, Rebute Gilman, Lord Commander of the Imperium. Now it's interesting, you'd expect him to hate more of his brothers. However, it doesn't really seem to manifest that way. For example, he never hated Logar for what he did to Monarchia. He was just following orders, and his hatred for Logar, as Logar himself later admits, didn't actually emerge until Kelf and the Heresy. Gilman didn't really hate any of his brothers on record until the Heresy broke out. Now, there are a few things you can obviously say, like he didn't like Curse's tactics all that much, and he wasn't a big fan of Angron. However, there was no real examples of outright hostility or hatred between him and his brothers. Although he did admit later that he was jealous of the lion. So that's kind of one of those things of how do you define someone disliking someone else. So, kind of hard to say. Yeah, I don't know. From all my knowledge of the lore and all of my research, I couldn't find a single example of hatred amongst his brothers until the heresy broke out. So we're just going to pencil that in as a question mark. Unless you have some of the fluff on hand, you can correct me with in the comments, which would be nice. Right. 14th, Death Guard, Mortarion. Now, Mortarion, again, like Curse, was one that didn't really encourage too much friendship. And there were a few people that he really didn't like. He didn't like his loyalist brothers that did the Librarius. So, for example, he openly hates Magnus. He doesn't like Sanguinius. And he had a bit of a respect for the Khan, but it still wasn't like. It was kind of just, it was borderlining on respect and not like. Now, in addition to that, he also didn't really like Dawn. He didn't really like Corax. Mortarion didn't have much time for his brothers, and he really hated those amongst his brothers who had the Librarius. So, we're going to pencil in for dislike. Definitely going to pencil in Sanguinius and especially Magnus. So, there you go for old Morty's sake. Of course the Khan gets added to that list when the heresy kicks off, but that's for a later time. Magnus the Red, the Crimson King, brother of mine. Magnus, well, there are two obvious contenders for who Magnus did not like out of his brothers, and they're rather simple. It's Russ, for his hypocrisy and criticism of the Librarius, and it's Mortarion, because he's fucking Mortarion. Also, actually thinking about it, one of the novellas I read, you probably should add Curse to that list as well. I mean, he didn't really hate his brothers that disagreed with him about the Librarians. He just thought they were misguided, misinformed, and ignorant savages. But definitely Mortarion and Russ. And I can't blame him on both accounts, really. Poor Magnus. I feel bad for him. Fucking blame Erebus for that one. In fact, fuck Erebus and Logar. Yeah, fuck Logar Club. Alright, moving along to the War Master. Now, Horus Lupercal, the War Master. Now, 16th Legion Primarch, there is actually a little bit on this when he's doing his dying confession after being wounded on Davin. He actually does admit that he doesn't like the Lion. He thinks he's a arrogant, preening bastard who thinks he's a bit too up himself, which the Lion reciprocates his dislike towards him. And then there's also other ones, for example, he doesn't actually say he likes them or dislikes them, but he does mention, you know, Curse is not a pleasant person to be around. So, I mean, are you really going to be friends with someone you don't find pleasant to be around? But in addition to that, Horus was a pretty much, well, he was named War Master for a reason. He was charismatic and got on with most people. He didn't seem to get on well with Corax, and he didn't seem to get on well with the Lion. However, aside from that, he seemed to have the like or respect of most of his brothers, so penciling in the Lion and Corax for that one. Logar. Again, Logar's just one of those ones people don't like. And I can't really blame him. I mean, he was respected by, like, Russ and Magnus and stuff, but he didn't have too many friends. As for people who disliked him, well, Ferris Manus didn't like him too much. Vulcan wasn't a huge fan of him. It's just Gilman, that was in the heresy in that era. But, yeah, Logar, he just didn't really make too many friends. Now, as of his brothers he notably hated personally, well, you add Gilman to the list after Monarchia, so that's the Great Crusade era, and that's really the main one. He really didn't like Gilman for what he did to Monarchia, and that was it really. He didn't really openly hate any of his other brothers, so yeah, just Gilman. Now, going from 17 to 18, Vulcan. Now, there is an easy answer for this. It's Curse. If you've read any of Vulcan's novels, then you will know that he did not like or get on or respect Curse at all. In fact, he openly hated him. And I can't blame him, because Curse is the worst. But Vulcan didn't like Curse at all. Now, he started to be a bit doubtful of Horus after he became War Master, but that wasn't an open hatred. And really, the only answer is Curse. And let's be honest, even the nicest guy in the Imperium is not gonna like Curse. So, Corax. Corax actually had more brothers he didn't like than you would expect. Now, he didn't like Perturbo. Their tactics and ideology was completely dissimilar from each other, and there was that whole fight between each other at the Battle of Gate 42. However, the one pulling the strings at the Battle of Gate 42 that Corax really had a dislike and a distaste for was Horus. He didn't like Horus at all anyway. He felt him arrogant, preening, and felt like he was the type of guy who just takes all the glory and the awards and leaves you with shit. So he didn't like him during the Great Crusade anyway, but after he made War Master in the Battle of Gate 42 incident, where Horus basically fed Corax's legion to the meat grinder, Corax really hated Horus, and in fact vowed never to campaign alongside him again, which is a pretty obvious sign of dislike. I mean, if someone came up to you and said, "I fucking hate you," then that's obvious. But if someone comes up to you and says, "I do not want to be in the same room with you ever," that's equally as obvious if he said "fuck off." So, yeah, there you go. Now, the other one on the list, the third one on the list, is of course Curse. Now, Corax fucking hated Curse because A, he saw him as a dark reflection of himself, and B, Curse is just literally the worst. I mean, who fucking likes Curse? He sucks. So yeah, Perturbo, Horus, and Curse. And that's basically it for Corax. Those were the three he disliked. Now, the fucking memes. Ugh, I hate these guys. I hate what the memes did to Alpharius and Omegon. However, thankfully there is enough solid information to give us a real picture, in the sense that during the Great Crusade era, Alpharius Omegon did not like Gilman, and they did not like Dawn for calling them out on their, on their antics and saying it was a waste of the Emperor's bolt shells, and for basically just disrespecting them and not being very nice and polite, is the reason that Alpharius Omegon hated Dawn and Gilman. So, yeah, that's the only true facts we know. They could have hated all of their brothers, or they could have secretly loved all of their brothers. If the memes hadn't have polluted them, then we'd maybe know. Also, just on a tangent here, I'm expecting the new Primarch novel with Alpharius Omegon to be nothing but memes. And if I'm proven wrong, then I am going to be so surprised. I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll eat a handful of grass if they actually do that. But anyway, so there you have it. Rather late, but there we go. A composite list of which of the Primarchs really didn't like each other. And some of them, of course, are well known throughout the lore, which are pretty obvious, Russ and the Lion, Magnus and Russ, that sort of thing. But then there are the other ones like Corax and Horus and stuff that you probably wouldn't have thought about. So yeah, what a lovely, happy family they are. So, cheerio for listening to this drivel if you did, I appreciate it. And please always remember that Conrad Curse is literally the worst.